About 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day, Bonnie Quinn and Carolyn Hyde, and here to help take us through the closing bell, a global simulcast. We're joined also by Tim Stenovec and Nora Melinda in for Carol Massar, bringing together our Bloomberg Television, radio and YouTube audiences worldwide to parse through the most crucial moments of the trading day. And what a trading day it was, team. Incredible, right? Yeah,
I mean, I think if we're talking about crucial moments, there was one moment, and that was Fed Chair Jay Powell's speech. And since then, we've seen stocks firmly in the green. A lot of people obviously focus on the major indices, the tech stocks and the S&P 500, but it's the Russell 2000 that is the real outlier today. Really, since around 11 o'clock, when it seems like traders fully digested those comments from the Fed chair, it's been firmly hovering just around 4% higher today, Nora.
Absolutely. I mean, we were just chatting about how there's so much that's really happened this week, but it's been such a flurry here on this Friday. Crazy to think that we were even talking about earnings earlier in the week, but all eyes are really on dissecting what we heard from Powell earlier today, especially as it relates to the dual mandate and what that looks like for the Federal Reserve and what they can do about the economy moving forward.
Well, at the moment, stocks near all-time highs. We questioned all of the week running into Powell. Valuations, particularly on the generative AI front, particularly on the Palantir front, for once they actually catch a bit of a bid. For me, one of the most key moments of the day as well was Intel. We finally get that focus that we are going to have a 10% stake by the United States government. That would be extraordinary news on any other day if it hadn't been Jackson Hole Day.
And don't forget, Canada taking off some of those USMCA goods tariffs as well. There's so much going on today, and we'll see, what else gets resolved through next week. All right, we are going to wait for these closing bells. Everybody very happy at the exchanges because we were finishing in the green. Let's take a look at those numbers as we wrap up this trading day. All right, we have the Dow Jones Industrial Average just so close to a record, which we haven't seen since December, but up 1.9%, 846 points there at 45,631. The S&P 500 up 1.5%, so well off its highs of the day, but nevertheless a nice gain to end the week at 64,66. And the Nasdaq, of course, up 1.9%. Those techs just continue to fly again, Tim.
You say broad-based on a day like today, and then there's broad-based. This is a day that is broad-based. 428 stocks in the S&P 500 moved to the upside today. Only 75 in the S&P 500 moved lower.
Let's just check in on industry groups and more broadly what we've seen across the board, because, just consumer staples in the red. Everything else is in the green for once we have breadth. But look, IT, technology, still on for a good run, 1.3%. The Nasdaq is still down on the week, but we're up on the day. Energy up 2%. Industrials, it really feels as though that's the air that gets powered by the hint of rate cuts.
Look at all that green on the screen. Scarlet Fu would call that a spinach pizza pie. I feel bad for whoever had to do decliners today. That would be Nora Melinda. Nora, thanks for doing
You left me with the
hard work. I did. I'm sorry about that. Hey, look at the KBW Bank Index, up 3.2%. Interest rate sensitive stocks surging today. This is the highest close, first record, going all the way back to 2022. First record for the KBW Bank Index, up 3.2% going back to 2022. All because of what we heard from Jay Powell. Traders happy that he signaled a willingness to cut rates next month, pointing to rising risks for the labor market, even as worries over inflation remain. Also, Caroline, you mentioned Intel. This was certainly on my radar today for a gainer. Intel shares absolutely surging on the day. This after we learned that the president said that Intel had agreed to give the U.S. government a 10% equity stake in the company. The president casting the agreement as one that would revitalize Intel, saying the company would, quote, has been left behind compared to competitors in the chip-making industry. Intel shares were up as much as 6% earlier in the session, and today up by 5.6%. Also on the day today, Apple shares hitting session highs. This after Bloomberg's Mark Gurman reported exclusively that Apple's in early discussions about using Google Gemini to power a revamped version of Siri's voice assistant. It's a key potential step toward outsourcing more of its AI technology. Talk about strange bedfellows. I mean,
it's a world of frenemies, Tim. It's a world of frenemies.
Can you believe that? I emailed Mark Gurman. It reminds me of that moment, Caroline, like 10 years ago when there was a demo. I think it was an iPad or an iPhone demo, and they invited Microsoft to come on the stage to, and everyone was like, "What are you? This is Apple and Microsoft. These are two companies."
But remember,
that have been arch
who
rivals
pays
for so
billions
many years.
to Apple all the time to be
Yes.
able to be the #1 search destination on their phones. That's the one that's been quibbled with by the government thus far.
There it is. Frenemies, I think, is the best way to describe that. All right, Nora, you have the hard job. Take it away.
Here we go. So let's take a look at some of the decliners that we saw today. I'm going to start out with the biggest decliner in the S&P 500 today, and that was Intuit. This has really been a stock that has been in focus after the tax software company delivered a tepid forecast, and this completely overshadowed an otherwise strong fourth quarter report. But we do have some commentary out from Morgan Stanley, the analysts over there, saying that given solid progress on core growth initiatives and a history of conservative guides, they would be a buyer on weakness here. But of course, we did see that the stock still ended lower today, down about 5.1% for this $185 billion company. Shares are up about 5.4% year to date. Let's move over to Workday shares. This is a company that's also been in focus. Investors were left disappointed that the HR software company left its subscription revenue guidance unchanged, completely flat here. Apart from a small boost that they did have from the Paradox acquisition, analysts on Wall Street are really flagging concerns around AI displacement continuing to linger here. Barclays is saying that the quarter was solid and the slight beats on a couple things like subscription revenue alongside with meaningful outperformance on profitability and cash flow would usually warrant a positive response here. But of course, we know this is one of the decliners. So here in the red on this Friday afternoon, shares of Workday are down about 14% so far this year. And lastly, let's take a look at SX, of keeping an eye on a lot of those rail stocks here. I'm looking at S15 rail. That index is down just a touch, down 0.3% today. But this is after we did hear that CSX and BNSF announced a new intermodal service products to ship between the Western and Eastern U.S. A lot of people were really looking for some sort of M&A here in the space for the railroad industry, but we're just seeing a partnership here. So you are seeing that reflected in terms of Wall Street sentiment here for this stock.
Some lonely sliders there today. Well, you know what else was down, guys? Yields were down. Look at that. It looks green, but actually that is the buying of treasuries, the dropping of yields. And that 10-year dropped like a stone after the Fed chair's speech was released. Down more than 10 basis points to finish the day at 369. Across the curve, you could see there was lower, but obviously towards the back end, not the huge moves that we saw at the front end. In fact, the 30-year yield are finishing the session at 487.76. And that 10-year glued to the 425 mark, 425.37. But I do want to point out one thing. Anna Wong from Bloomberg Economics is out with a note suggesting that perhaps markets are being a little bit too sanguine here, that the speech was actually peppered with hawkishness, in her words. She's saying he talked a lot about labour market cooling. He didn't signal the need for urgent action. So maybe watch the space. Maybe we've all sort of written off September as a month where the rate cycle starts, the rate cutting cycle, and maybe in the end it doesn't happen, which would make for a big reversal, I imagine.
Yeah, actually, Nora brought this up on our program earlier. Is it going to be, if there is a cut in September, is it going to be a hawkish cut or a dovish cut? And yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. And there's plenty for us to sort of digest between now and then on a lot of data that comes between now and then that could change the narrative and change the picture. It's back to school time, everybody. So make sure to go get the backpack and
the pencils,
pack up for the dorm rooms because it's time to drop the kids off at college or wherever they're going. What we're learning now about this year in university is it's quite a bit different than previous years as a result of the pressure that some of these universities are feeling for a few different reasons. One, over the finances that have been hit as a result of federal grants that have gone away, but also the question about who's coming from around the world to universities that are traditionally filled with students from many different countries as a result of the way they've grown in recent years. That's a big question given the pressure that the Trump administration has put on these universities and also immigration changes. Now some of these colleges, Nora, are actually tapping their wait lists to fill spots before classes even begin.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting way that they're really trying to grapple with a lot of these financial pressures. Some of the top universities that we're discussing here, Stanford University, Duke, they're sending acceptances to waitlisted students just weeks before. Of course, we know a lot of these students are going to be trickling into the classrooms here. So an interesting creative pivot, if you will, as to what to do here in terms of the financial landscape.
Not just sending acceptance letters all of a sudden, but also a little money oftentimes to sweeten the deal or to pay them back if they've already given some money to another college, or also emotional reasons, apparently. You know, you can get emotionally attached to the college you're going to. So.
Well, talking of sending money and creative pivots, The weekend. It is the weekend upon us. And can we talk about The Weeknd, the artist? $1 billion in financing backed by his music rights. That's apparently what's being negotiated at the moment. Lyric Capital Group going out there saying, look, maybe we could, with your using collateral of your music rights, of your master records, $500 million in senior debt, $250 million of junior debt, maybe a little bit of $250 million in equity. So interesting. Taylor Swift is buying back all of these things. He's busy trying to perhaps use it as collateral. I want to know what he's going to spend it on.
That's sort of like my question is. Like, does he need the money?
Is he going to make another Idol with Sam Levinson?
I'm just so curious when he's going to go by, because I mean, he's switching his name to Abel, right? That's his actual name. He's not going to be called The Weeknd anymore. So I'm curious when this is going to come into play here.
But I was fascinated because if you look at other artists that have sold their catalogs, like Bruce Springsteen, 550 million, Bob Dylan, 300 million, 1 billion for The Weeknd, but he is the most streamed artist on Spotify.
Wow.
In fact, he's 25 songs with 1 billion streams, and that's at least 7 or 8 more than Drake and Taylor Swift.
He's shaking up Atlanta right now. He's out on the road. He's doing his thing.
Having a
Go
blast.
listen.